Hi, so I am doing my presentation on the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and how, in general, cybercrime and, excuse me, cyber laws and regulations are outdated and are in dire need of reformation. Um, my thesis is that cybercrime laws are outdated and unethical. Due to the rise of cybercrime in the United States, our government is responsible for reforming incredibly out of date and unethical computer laws. A new approach is essential to make sure future and current cyber activists, white hat hackers, and young black hat hackers are safe from the outdated laws and regulations regarding cybercrime. More specifically, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which was enacted in 1986. To explain the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it's essentially fraud and any related activity in connection with computers. So it can be a whole spectrum of things. It could just it's practically any online crime almost falls under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is a problem because something as simple as like minor vandalism is equally as punishable as taking down a whole website and holding it down for ransom. Uh, but to get more into it, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is knowingly accessing a computer without permission or consent, intentionally accesses a computer without authorization or exceeds authorized access, and thereby obtains either A, information contained in a financial record of a financial institution, B, information from any department or agency of the United States, or C, information from any protected computer. That's just a very minor summary of it, the tip of the iceberg, but kind of just, I think is a good introduction to it. If you want to look more into it, I'll probably attach a link to the law. It was enacted in 1986 to try and put a halt to cybercrime. It did absolutely nothing of the sorts, and it is now one of the fastest growing rates of crime worldwide. An obvious problem that is in dire need of a solution. Cyber criminals are easily the biggest threat to all businesses, government, and organizations worldwide, including health and essential U.S. infrastructure. For example, our government isn't worried about invasion or any of that. They're worried about China or Russia hacking our power plants, which is honestly incredibly easy, and that's a problem. Cyber criminals. Wait, no. With that being said, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act has a lot of problems and is in dire need of a new approach to protect security researchers, tinkerers with non-nefarious intentions, and privacy seekers in general. With cybercrime on the rise, I see it as one of the biggest societal and cultural issues we will have to deal with, not just here in the States, but worldwide. Stealing money on a computer, if you're tech savvy enough, is almost the equivalent of robbing a convenience store or bank with a Harry Potter cloak. You're invisible. The police can't track you if you're a ghost. I mean, well, technically they can. There's always a way to find you if you commit a cybercrime. It just has to be worth the time and effort. If you're committing minor crimes, they don't care. It's not worth the time and effort to track you down. But if you're committing big felony offenses, they will find you. But it's hard and it takes a lot of manpower. Something that law enforcement isn't really prepared for. It's a whole new realm of crime, and it's ever evolving, and law enforcement will always be 3 steps behind. This is morally significant because our future IT security personalities are getting similar or more jail time than child sex offenders. Morally, I cannot agree that someone playing with zeros and ones on a computer, the only damage being caused is downtime or financial damage to major corporations, is comparable to the lifelong trauma a child faces from their sexual abusers. The idea that computer hackers get similar sentences in federal prison for practically victimless crimes is a crime in itself. While punishing wrongdoers for breaking the law, whether they are hackers or not, is justified, the punishment must fit the crime. Well, one could simply just argue, well, keep the sentences the same for computer hackers and increase the jail time for sex offenders, and your problem is solved. I agree half-heartedly. If the cybercrime fits the bill, like sending ransomware to a hospital, for example, resulting in the possible loss of hundreds or thousands of lives for financial gain, is incredibly unethical and should be punished greatly. Violating a website's terms of service, not so much. A case study would be the story of Aaron Swartz, who committed suicide due to legal pressure, facing 50 years of federal prison time for a practically victimless crime. Aaron Swartz was born in the United States. He was a political activist, hacktivist, programmer, and a founder of the incredibly popular online forum Reddit. Aaron made it one of his life goals to build a free and open internet, not knowing that ultimate goal would end up with Aaron taking his own life. Aaron Swartz is under indictment by the United States for unauthorized access of JSTOR. JSTOR is essentially a digital library of academic journals, books, scholarly articles, all that fun stuff. As I said before, Aaron Swartz dreamed of an open and free internet. His intention was to give this information free to all those who wished to read or study, but it never got to that point. He got in trouble before he could even upload it, so all he did was download the information unauthorized, and that was the, oh, hi doggy, and that was the trouble. That was the jail time he faced. While it seems like an ethically sound idea from a utilitarian perspective, which would be the greatest amount of good for the greatest number, or actions are right insofar as they promote happiness, wrong insofar as they produce unhappiness, the U.S. government found it to be unjust and wanted to make an example out of Aaron Swartz, trying to prosecute him for a minimum of 50 years in federal prison. 50 years in federal prison for trying to allow those who do not have access to scholarly articles the opportunity to learn. 50 years in federal prison for trying to create an open internet where everyone has access to the fruit of knowledge. I think 50 years for that is draconic, barbaric, evil, all three words that come to mind when I think of it. For perspective, to compare major crimes to Aaron Swartz, crimes that have a maximum of 10 years in prison: manslaughter, assaulting a Supreme Court justice, knowingly spreading HIV. Crimes that have a maximum of 20 years in prison: armed bank robbery, selling child pornography, selling slaves, violence at international airports, genocidal eugenics, and participation in nuclear and weapons of mass destruction threats to the United States. So now, after hearing the maximum penalties for all the crimes above, could you still argue that the penalty the U.S. government wanted to pursue against Aaron Swartz is ethical? Could you still argue against the idea that the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is in dire need of reformation? Well, I do know there are objections. Aaron Swartz did obtain the data through unauthorized access. While he was an activist for an open internet, what Aaron did was still theft by definition. He did not have consent to obtain those files. With that being said, he broke the law and should be punished for it. While it is completely true, Aaron Swartz did make illegal access to JSTOR, in turn violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Aaron Swartz did break the law and made a big mistake. With that being said, Aaron Swartz should not have gotten off the hook without repercussion, but the punishment should fit the crime. It shouldn't be 50 years. This was nothing but overzealous prosecutors trying to take advantage of the draconic laws, trying to make an example out of Aaron. If anything, Aaron's crime should have been a misdemeanor that carried no less than, 5 years. These barbaric punishments should only be in response to egregious crimes, not a victimless crime such as Aaron's. There was no loss of life, no permanent trauma, no physical injury. It was a nonviolent, victimless crime. With that being said, cybercrime laws are outdated and unethical. They need to be reformed due to the major rise of cybercrime in the United States. I think in 10-20 years, street crime will be almost obsolete and everything will be online. And with that, if we don't have reformation, our federal prisons are just going to be filled with nonviolent computer offenders, and that's a problem.